Hey book lovers, want to hear a story? Welcome back to Storytime with Em. This is a bonus episode from Em's Books and Cats podcast, where I share my books a chapter a week. Right now, I am sharing my oldest book that is still available for purchase. It's called Do You Remember Ella? And this week is chapter 5. Enjoy. By the end of the day, the whole school knew that Byron had been the one behind the pranks. There was a meeting to announce that the person behind the attacks had been discovered. They didn't mention Byron's name, but everyone knew he had left in the middle of the night. It was easy to figure out. During the meeting, I looked over at Brando. He had never shown up last night, and I wondered what he would have told me if he had. He was staring at his hands as they clenched and unclenched in his lap. His face looked sullen and angry. As if he felt me watching him, he looked up suddenly and met my gaze. He looked at me for a while. His hands never ceased clenching. His face did not wear the same relieved expression as the other students, and I feared that the mystery was not yet over. I was right. Marcus left me after the meeting and went to hockey practice. I had just spread my books over a desk in the library when he appeared at my side. His face was pale. "Marcus, what are you doing here? Don't you have practice?" He sat down slowly. His lower lip was shaking, and he looked like he might cry. "It happened again." "What happened?" "The rink is destroyed. All of the glass is gone, and there's a message painted on the ice." "Do you remember Ella?" He nodded. "Yeah, the paint's still wet. It couldn't have been Byron." "Maybe it is. No one knows where he went. Maybe he's hiding out somewhere on campus." Marcus shook his head and looked doubtful. "They've been searching for him all day. They would have found him by now. The snow makes it impossible to hide your tracks." I sighed and leaned against his shoulder. "Is this ever going to end?" "It has to eventually. It's a small school. They'll find out who's doing it soon enough." "Why did Byron leave if he didn't do it?" "They expelled him. He was outside your dorm that night." "They didn't expel him, Marcus. Mrs. Miller said he left in the middle of the night and left a letter confessing to everything." "That doesn't make sense, unless he's still hiding around here somewhere." "I wish I could see that letter. I wonder if it's like the others." "There's been more letters?" "Yeah, I have a few of them." I wasn't sure I should have told him, but it just slipped out. "I'll show you. We need to go somewhere private." "The farmhouse?" "Perfect." There were no new tracks on the path. Our footprints from the night before were mostly covered by snow. It was snowing heavily as we made our way up there, but I still didn't want to go inside. We stayed on the porch and watched the snow fall in gigantic fluffy flakes. I showed Marcus the letters and told him everything. He looked at each one carefully and listened intently. When I was done, he leaned back against the porch railing and looked at me with amazement. "That is some mystery, Sophie. Have you told anyone else about this?" "No, not yet, but I feel like I should. Headmaster Quincy might be forced to actually do something about it. Did you know he hasn't even called the police about any of it? Disappearing teachers and students and tons of destruction to private property, but he hasn't done a thing." Marcus picked up one of the letters again. It was the one Jennifer gave me during biology. I wondered if she still thought I was behind it all. I watched Marcus as he read the letter. There was a puzzled look on his face. Then he sighed again as he laid the letter down beside the others. They made a bright rainbow of confusion against the rotten gray boards. "Maybe you shouldn't tell anyone, Sophie. It doesn't look very good that you have all of these. You've also been connected in some way to every prank. This might just arouse their suspicions again." "You don't think I'm behind this, do you?" "No. I know you're not the one doing all of this, but you need to be careful. Other people might not see it the way I do. They don't know you like I do." He smiled and kissed me. I tried to enjoy it, but I was distracted. There was a loud thump from inside the house, and I jumped away from Marcus. What was that? Marcus grinned and shrugged his shoulders. Probably a squirrel or something. There's lots of ways for wildlife to get into the house. Maybe we should go. Marcus stood up and stretched his long, muscular frame. It is almost time for dinner. I'm starving. I gathered the letters and placed them back in my notebook. I turned once to look back at the house as I followed Marcus down the path. I thought I saw something move in the upstairs window, but when I stopped Marcus and told him to look, there was nothing there. Poor girl. This whole thing has you spooked. Don't worry. I'm going to take care of you. He put his arm around me and led me down the path. The dining hall was buzzing with gossip when we got there. Everyone knew about the hockey rink, and the school was in chaos. The pride of the school was tied up in our hockey team, and this attack sparked the most rage. Many of the students stared as Marcus and I entered the dining hall, and the din of voices grew even louder. There were many accusing faces, and they didn't try to lower their voices as we passed. Jennifer approached us soon after we sat down with our food. She greeted Marcus casually as she slipped into the seat next to me. So, Sophie, where have you been all afternoon? That's not really any of your business, Jennifer. She glared at me, but after a quick glance over at Marcus, she tried to laugh it off. You may have all the teachers fooled, but I'm not. There's going to be a lot of people watching you from now on. You can't attack our school and get away with it. Marcus stood up angrily. Sophie and I were making out in the woods this afternoon, if you must know. She hasn't done anything to the school, and I think it's time you left. We want to be alone. Fine. She stood up huffily and joined a table of her teammates nearby. Marcus sat back down and placed a hand on my knee. Just ignore her. You know you haven't done anything wrong. I'm just so sick of all of this. I wish Ella would come back and set things straight. This obviously has something to do with her. He rubbed my back gently and smiled. Maybe she will. That night I returned to my usual room in Felicity Hall. I heard the laughter and happy voices of the other girls as they passed my door, but I stayed where I was. I tried to study, but I was exhausted and decided to go to bed early. I had only been asleep for a few hours when someone knocked lightly on my door. The clock said it was just after 1 a.m, and I crept quietly to my door. There was another soft knock. I slowly turned the knob and opened the door. Jennifer was standing in the hallway in her pajamas. I was too surprised to speak at first. Jennifer lived in one of the smaller female dorms, and there was no reason for her to be in Felicity so late at night. I stared at her for a long moment while she shifted nervously from foot to foot. Her face was pale and scared. Can I come in? Do you know what time it is? I know it's late. I'm sorry. I really need to talk to you. It can wait until morning. Please, Sophie. Look, you were kind of awful to me before, and I'm not really interested in anything you have to say. I know I was terrible. What do you expect? Everything is so crazy around here, and you were Ella's best friend. It's natural to suspect. I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the doorway and held it open. Please, Sophie. I'm sorry. I'm really scared. I heard noises at my door earlier, and I found this on my floor. She held up a piece of bright green paper covered with familiar handwriting. I opened the door. She hurried inside and sat down on the bed. I took the letter from her and sat at my desk. Attitude will get you far, but ruin you in the end. There's no way for someone like you to understand what it means to be a friend. Goodbye, old friend. When the time comes, please don't yella. I will see you very soon, because you remember Ella. Jennifer was crying. Her hands covered her face and her shoulders shook. I felt bad for her, but I didn't know what to say. There was no mystery to this letter. The message was very clear. Jennifer, do you mind telling me what happened between you and Ella? She looked up at me and glared. What do you mean? Well, I know you used to be friends. Then something happened and you weren't anymore. She wasn't my girlfriend or anything like that. None of the stuff Valencia said was true. I know that. What actually happened? She clasped her hands together and sighed. She didn't reply for a long time, and she stared at the floor. Slowly, She lifted her hands to her face and started to rub her temples as if she had a bad headache. Someone knocked on my door, and we both jumped. I went to the door, but as I laid my hand on the knob, a bright pink piece of paper slid underneath. I threw the door open, but the mysterious letter writer was gone. I turned back to Jennifer, who was pale and shaking again. I picked up the paper and locked the door behind me. I opened my letter. Do you remember the walk we took one cold afternoon? Retracing your steps will help you understand. More details will come soon. Keep the memory alive. Never forget. The answers will come to you. Never forget, Ella. I held the letter in my trembling hands. Jennifer watched me read it, but she refused to take it when I offered it to her. No, I don't want to know. She sighed again and squeezed her hands tightly. I never told anyone about this before. It makes me sound like a real bitch. But I couldn't help it. If you'd seen his face, you'd understand. Whose face? Brando. We had a little fling freshman year. I was already dating Quint at that point, and I knew Ella had a thing for Brando, but I did it anyway. She caught us and threatened to tell everyone, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Who would believe her over me? Brando didn't want to cause any problems, and he said he'd agree to whatever story I told. I was concerned with saving my reputation at that point. You remember what freshman year was like, trying so hard to fit in and find new friends. The rumors about Ella and I were bad, and I couldn't let anything else get out. She looked at me with defiant eyes. I know what you're thinking. I'm a terrible friend and a bad person, right? You knew Ella. She was crazy, and it just kept getting worse. I had to separate myself from her. It was self-preservation. You are awful. No worse than anyone else. How well did you know Ella? I mean, really know her. She was secretive and strange. Not exactly the best kind of friend herself, really. Can you judge me and not her? What kind of friend are you? Better than you. I would never do something like that to my best friend. I would have stood by her and stayed with my own boyfriend. She wasn't with Brando yet. He only dated her last year as a joke. He's been in love with me ever since. He never got over me. He still sends me love letters all the time. It makes Quint really angry, but he won't stop. They even fought over me once. Remember when Brando had a broken nose? It was all because he's so in love with me. I stared at her in disbelief. Her life was being threatened, but she could still sit there and talk with pride about the people she'd hurt with her selfishness. I'd never met anyone like her. She would do what was necessary for survival, and she didn't care who got hurt. I didn't pity her anymore. I wasn't sure what her letter meant, but I knew I didn't want to help her. She had chosen her path, and I could not deter her from it. I got her out of my room as quickly as I could. I just hoped Ella didn't know Jennifer had been here. It seemed possible that she did. Jennifer let me keep her letter. I added both to my collection. I spread the letters out on my desk. I couldn't stop thinking of it as a beautiful rainbow of confusion. Brando and Jennifer's affair was just another piece of seemingly useless information. I felt bad for Ella. Maybe her relationship with Brando had been tarnished by the knowledge that he loved someone else. That it was her ex-best friend made it even worse. Maybe that's why she left. Brando held the missing piece to this puzzle. That much was obvious. It explained his strange behavior and his unwillingness to speak to me. I went to bed determined to make him talk to me the next day. It wouldn't be easy because Marcus had become increasingly jealous of him, and any other guy I went near. I would have to find a way to talk to Brando when Marcus wasn't around. Still, I was determined. Ella's life had been filled with people who used her, treated her like garbage, and dumped her when they were done with her. I couldn't be one of those people. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I still thought of her as my friend. I would do what I could to assist her in her strange plot for revenge. I just hoped it wouldn't get me into too much trouble. And that is the end of Chapter 5, Book Lovers. I hope you're enjoying Do You Remember Ella? I will be back next time with a new chapter. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a beautiful week, and until next time, keep reading.